Hey, thank you for clicking on this video. On the last video, we talked about homologous structures, and on this one, we're going to talk about vestigial structures. You know, do you really need your appendix? Do you really need your tonsils? Do we really have a tailbone left over from a primate past? We're going to get into these things and more on this video. So evolutionists are trying to change the meaning of vestigial now because more evidence is coming out that it's all been baloney. And so they now say, well, vestigial doesn't mean that it doesn't have a function. It just means it had a different function in the past, which isn't what they used to say. They're just trying to reinvent, just like they reinvent what the definition of evolution is. You know what I mean? They don't say it's a macro change, because they'll never see that. They won't see a change from one type of animal to another. So let's talk about, do you need your tonsils? Well, this doctor says, yes, you do need your tonsils. It's actually a part of the lymphatic system. It's part of the immune system. You need your tonsils. You know? This doctor says the main function of tonsils is to trap germs, bacteria, and viruses, which you may breathe in. Proteins called antibodies produced by the immune cell, and the tonsils help to kill germs and help to prevent throat and lung infections. Well, how about that? You need your tonsils. In fact, now they're not taking out tonsils. Right? They're having to admit that they were wrong. Which is one of the things that lady mentions in this video. So they're still teaching this. But it's false. You need your tonsils, people. So from the National Library of Medicine, at the government page, they say the tonsils are part of the body's immune system. Because of their location at the throat and palate, they can stop germs entering the body through the mouth or nose. The tonsils also contain a lot of white blood cells, which are responsible for killing germs. You need your tonsils. So do you need your appendix? Yes. You do need your appendix too. In fact, ScienceABC.com says, unlike the common belief that the appendix is a vestigial organ, recent research has shown that the appendix does have a number of important immune functions and other applications, both for developing fetuses and grown adults. I like this. I'm going to do this Austin Powers style. It's hilarious. This meme is hilarious. Thank you to whoever created it, because that's the truth. A bunch of professors saying stuff vestigial to keep evidence alive that's actually dead. So right here, Scientific American. For years, the appendix was credited with very little physiological function. We know now, however, that the appendix serves an important role in the fetus and in young adults. Endocrine cells appear in the appendix of the human fetus at around the 11th week of development. These endocrine cells of the fetal appendix have been shown to produce various biogenic amines and peptide hormones, compounds that assist with various biological control, homeostatic mechanisms. There had been little prior evidence of this or any other role of the appendix in animal research because the appendix does not exist in domestic animals. Among adult humans, the appendix is now thought to be involved primarily in immune function. Lymphoid tissue begins to accumulate in the appendix shortly after birth and reaches a peak between the second and third decades of life, decreasing rapidly thereafter and particularly disappearing after the age of 60, which is probably why old people get sick easier. The appendix is part of your immune system along with the tonsils. It's I find it quite ridiculous that these people still teach this. I mean, it should be illegal. There's actually laws that say that textbooks are supposed to be current and up to date. A law in California. But why aren't they? Why are they still teaching this as evidence? This is why evolution is a religion. It isn't real. You have to have faith in evolution because there's actually not evidence for it. It is a theory that people think. And if they want to call the Christians' worldview a theory on how things started, go ahead. So I also wanted to hit on the other thing in that video, the tailbone. It's actually the coccyx. It's not a tailbone. It's not a residual tailbone. It doesn't even curve the same way as a regular tailbone. So, the coccyx is actually very important. And it's ridiculous that she said there's no use for it. That's just left over from a tail. Spinehealth.com says, although the tailbone is considered vestigial or no longer necessary in the human body, it does have some function in the pelvis. For instance, the coccyx is one part of 3-part support for a person in the seated position. Weight is distributed between the bottom portions of the 2 hip bones and the tailbone, providing balance and stability when a person is seated. The tailbone is the connecting point for many pelvic floor muscles. These muscles help support the anus and aid in defecation, support the vagina in females, and assist in walking, running, and moving the legs. Trust me, you need your coccyx. It's not even a tailbone. You need it. It's not vestigial. It's not left over. It is part of the design of the human body. If you didn't have it, you would be in serious trouble. It cracks me up. Besides the muscles connecting to it, there's also a part of the membrane that wraps the spine. There's 3 layers that wrap around the spine. The last layer connects where your spine comes through the hole at the top, at the bottom of your head, top of your neck. And it goes all the way down, and the other point it connects to is your tailbone. So it's part of the nerve system too. If you have an out of line or a hurt tailbone, it can mess with your nervous system. I wanted to take a look at what vestigial means, because evolutionists are trying to change the definition, and they want to say that it doesn't mean a part that we don't need anymore. It means a part that now has a different use. They're changing it because they're wrong, but their ego's too big to say, hey, we have to throw out this dead theory of evolution because it's actually not true. Come up with a new theory. Evolution is a dead theory. It's not how it happened. Which is why many people are actually switching to the aliens seeded us theory, including some evolutionists. Which is the whole video that got us started on this. Someone commenting on the Richard Dawkins video, where he admits that if you look at molecular biology and biochemistry, you can find evidences of seeding. Where he actually says possibly find evidence. But there is evidence that the things we've created. And we're going to touch more on that when we get into DNA as well. Let's see, vestigial, forming a very small remnant of something that was once larger or more noticeable. In biology, it says of an organ or part of the body, degenerate, rudimentary, or atrophied, having become functionless in the course of evolution. Well, then there's no such thing as vestigial organs, if that's the definition. What I find funny is this right here. Darwin concluded that vestigial structures were incompatible with special creation, as he questioned why a divine creator would create organs which seemingly serve no purpose in an organism. People are still following Darwin. It's crazy. He found some finches on an island whose beaks had changed size. He didn't know what a cell looked like. He didn't know the complexity of a cell. He didn't know the complexity of anything, and everything he has said is not true. There's vestigial organs, not true. There's transitional fossils, not true. I mean, this guy isn't someone who was very, very smart. He might have been somewhat intelligent, but it's really, he was working with people who were occultists, and other people gave him these ideas. There's letters back and forth. I mean, it's all stuff you can look up. And he was racist. So evolution's actually racist. He was a complete racist. In fact, he was so racist, he called them savages. The people on the islands that he got to meet, he called them savages. He also wanted to keep the white blood so pure that he married his own cousin. Right? He's committing incest. He went against everything in the Bible because he was being trained up in the Bible and he rejected it. He was actually a theologian. That's what he went to training for, because he was lazy. So he was so lazy and wouldn't work, and all he would do was play around, according to his dad, that he got sent to theology school. So here's an article from ICR. One doctor they talked to said, years ago, my long search for evidence of vestigial organs actually revealed many uses for each organ I studied. And I'm going to link all these articles in the description below. Here's another article. This is from Answers in Genesis. Vestigial organs, evidence for evolution. In this article, they mention Darwin on rudimentary organs, which is what he called them. And Darwin was the first to claim this. Like I said, it's retarded, actually. I mean, he didn't know the function of them, so he said they were useless. Or he was just making stuff up. That's really the bottom line. So there was you can read this article, but they used to say hundreds of things. At least 100 things in the human body were vestigial. Now it's been narrowed down to a few, and then it'll be none, because they just don't understand what they're for, because we humans think we are the greatest things, but we're not, because there's a God whose thoughts are higher than ours, who's beyond our ability to understand, who can create things that we could actually never create. The human body is still more complex than any car, or any space station, or anything we've ever developed as the human race. Way beyond. A cell is beyond. So I'd like to take a look at what Dr. David Minton has to say. He worked with Answers in Genesis. He is a renowned medical doctor. He has a PhD in biology from Brown University. He was a teacher at one of the medical schools. And I'm going to put a link to his profile, and you can check out the awards that he's won. And so let's see what he has to say about vestigial organs.
Robert Wiedersheim, back in 1896, came up with 86 vestigial organs in the body. And Wiedersheim's vestigial organs included the parathyroid, and included the pineal, even included the pituitary gland, without which, of course, we'd be in very serious difficulty. But at his time, functions were not known for these organs. And this is one of the problems with vestigial organs. What's the difference between an organ that truly has a function, but we don't know the function, from an organ that, let's say, has no function? So it depends on our ego, whether we're willing to say we just simply don't know the function, or it couldn't have a function if I didn't know it. Let's look at a few specific examples, critically, of vestigial organs. Well, I think the most famous vestigial organ of all in our body is the appendix. That and the tailbone. We'll talk about both of them. What about the appendix? First of all, there really is no evolutionary story to the appendix. Evolutionists say that it's a vestigial cecum. What's a cecum? This part of the large intestine that hangs down below where the small intestine enters is called the cecum. So the first thing we need to know is humans already have a cecum. So the appendix can't be a vestige of a cecum we used to have. Where is the appendix? Well, the appendix is right down here. If we can turn this perhaps a bit, maybe I can even pull this out. We've opened up the cecum, and this opening right here goes into the appendix. Now, is the appendix useless? For many years, people thought it didn't have a function, and so back in the 1900s, people would cut out the appendix even when it was normal. Surgeons would often just grab the appendix when they were in the vicinity. But that's not done today. And one thing that's come up just within the last few years is we now have a pretty good, very plausible function. The appendix appears to be a safe house in which bacteria can be harbored that are useful. And you might think bacteria are all harmful or not. We have certain bacteria that are useful for digestion. And what can happen is, in a bout of diarrhea or something, the large intestine can be purged of its useful bacteria. And you need to get the good bacteria, the useful ones, back in the gut again. And it's believed that this little appendix structure sticking off to the side as it does out of the main tract is used to then re-inoculate the intestine with the useful bacteria. What about the other often cited example of a vestigial organ? That would have to be the so-called tailbone, right down in here. It is not functionally a tail, and of course there is no empirical evidence that it ever did serve as a tail in human beings. And so what then is this? Is it just useless? Is it just simply the end? Hardly. It's a very useful piece of bone. In fact, if you rank ordered bone and how important bones were on how many muscles attached to it, coming from how many different directions, I think this little piece of bony real estate might win. It is the focal point for the attachment of all of the muscles that form the floor of what we call the pelvic diaphragm. The pelvic diaphragm is a muscular bowl that attaches to the brim of the pelvis here and then converges and attaches to the coccyx. That's a better name for the tailbone, the coccyx, which really means a cuckoo's beak. It looks sort of like a cuckoo's beak. And that muscular floor, right where my hand is there now, that muscular floor holds the organs that reside in this lower part of the abdomen and pelvis. And what organs are they? Well, let's take a look here. We'll pull out the liver, and pull out the stomach, pull out a few organs. We'll pull out the whole small or large intestine. And now we're down to that muscular floor. And sitting on top of this is the bladder, the structure here. In the case of a male, under the bladder, we have the prostate gland. It's way down in here. Now you can see that bowl very nicely down there. In a female, the uterus would be here. and the end of the colon, the sigmoid colon, comes down into this region. Now, if we didn't have that muscular floor, because we stand vertically, the first time we would go like that, whoopee, things could sort of just go right down through this area, but that muscular floor holds everything in place. So, an exceedingly important bony structure, not a useless, a leftover vestigial tail. Well, that's my story on vestigial organs, and I hope you've learned something new here. Thank you.
So now that we got a actual anatomy lesson from Dr. David Minton, I hope you can understand that this is truly fake evidence. And this video went a little bit longer than normal. I thank you for staying tuned. Next time, we're going to be looking at the DNA. I'd like to end this video with a prayer. Lord, we come before you humbled, and we thank you for all you've done in our lives. We want to give you the honor, the glory, and the praise. And we also want you to use us to reach other people. Ask that this video be used to reach other people, that they may come to a saving grace and a knowledge of you as the Lord, and accept you and trust in you, Lord Jesus Christ. And I just ask that you provide healing for this nation, for all the people who need it. I pray for the persecuted Christians around the world, and I just ask that your will be done through this video, through these videos, and through my life. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Hey, so thank you again, and we'll see you at the next video. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for watching this video.